My fiance's voice was on a disturbing DVD I received 3 days before our wedding. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post on a forum like this, but I'm desperate. My wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it turned into a nightmare that I'm still running from. Let me start from the beginning. I'm Lily, 28 years old, and I was engaged to James for a little over a year. We met at a charity fundraiser, hit it off immediately, and it had been a whirlwind of a romance ever since. He was charming, successful, and came from a well-respected family in our small town of Oakwood. Everything seemed perfect. Until 3 days before our wedding. I was sorting through the mail, sifting past the usual pile of RSVPs and last-minute wedding cards, when I found a padded envelope with no return address. Curious, I tore it open. Inside was a plain DVD in a clear case, unmarked except for a post-it note that read, "Watch me." Now I know what you're thinking. Who uses DVDs in 2024? My curiosity got the better of me. I popped it into our ancient player, hooked up to our living room TV, left over from when James moved in. The screen flickered to life, and what I saw, God, I wish I could unsee it. It started with a dimly lit forest clearing. The camera was shaky, like someone was filming an old handheld camcorder. Figures in dark robes moved around a bonfire, their faces hidden behind grotesque animal masks. The flames cast eerie shadows, making their movements seem jerky and unnatural. I was about to turn it off, thinking it was some sick prank. Then I heard a voice that made my blood run cold.
"Bring forth the sacrifice."
It was James. I'd know his voice anywhere, that slight southern drawl, the way he emphasizes certain words. But this wasn't the warm, loving tone I was used to. This was cold, commanding, almost cruel. The robed figures parted, and two of them dragged forward what looked like a person, bound and struggling. I couldn't make out any details in the flickering firelight, but the muffled scream sent shivers down my spine. I slammed my hand on the power button, my heart racing. What the hell had I just watched? Had it been fake? It had to be fake, right? Some elaborate hoax. With shaking hands, I rewound the video and played that part again and again. Each time, I became more certain that was James's voice. I must have watched it a dozen times before I heard the front door open. James was home. I yanked it out of the DVD player and shoved it into the first hiding spot I could think of, the pocket of my bathrobe hanging on the back of the door.
"Lily, you home, sweetheart?"
James called out. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. "I'm here," I managed to croak out. He walked in, all smiles and warmth, leaning in to kiss me. I flinched away, instinctively.
"Everything okay?"
He asked, his brow furrowing with concern. I forced a smile. "Just wedding jitters, I guess." He laughed, pulling me into a hug.
"Cold feet already? Don't worry, it'll all be perfect."
As I stood there, in his embrace, my mind raced. The man holding me seemed nothing like the cold voice on that video, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong.
"Hey,"
James said, pulling back to look at me.
"You sure you're all right? You look pale."
I nodded, not trusting myself to speak.
"Well, I've got a surprise for you."
He grinned.
"Remember that necklace you loved at the antique store? I went back and got it for you. Thought it'd be perfect for the wedding."
He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it. Inside was a delicate silver chain with a pendant, a tiny animal skull, intricately carved. I felt the blood drain from my face. It looked just like the masks in the video.
"Don't you like it?"
James asked, his smile faltering. It's beautiful," I lied. "I'm just overwhelmed. Thank you." As he fastened it around my neck, his fingers brushed my skin. All I could think was, who are you, really, and what have I gotten myself into? I spent most of that night tossing and turning, my mind racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those masked figures dancing around the fire. I kept hearing James's voice, cold and commanding, echoing in my head. The next morning I woke up to an empty bed. There was a note on James's pillow.
"Gone for the run. Back soon. Love you."
I don't know what possessed me, but I found myself creeping into his office. I never snooped before. I'd always trusted him completely, but now? Now I felt like I was living with a stranger. His desk was meticulously organized, as always. I started rifling through drawers, not sure what I was looking for. Old bills, work documents, nothing out of the ordinary. Then I opened the bottom drawer. My hands trembled as I lifted out a small wooden box. It was beautifully carved with intricate symbols I couldn't recognize. My heart pounding, I opened it. Inside was a collection of what looked like tiny bones. Animal bones, I hoped. There was a small vial of dark liquid, a lock of hair tied with a red ribbon, and a USB drive. I grabbed the drive and rushed to my laptop. As it loaded, I heard the front door open. James was back.
Lily?
He called out. "Just a sec!" I shouted back, my voice unnaturally high. The drive finished loading, revealing a single video file. I didn't have time to watch it, so I quickly emailed it to myself and deleted the sent email. Then, thinking quickly, I uploaded it to a secure cloud storage account I rarely used, under a fake name. I had just closed my laptop when James walked in, flushed from his run.
There you are.
He smiled, leaning in to kiss me. I forced myself not to pull away.
What are you up to?
"Oh, just confirming some last-minute wedding details," I lied. His eyes narrowed slightly.
In my office?
I was looking for stamps," I said, lamely. "For thank you cards." He stared at me for a long moment, then his face relaxed into a smile. There was something off about it, a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before.
Well, no need to stop those yet. We've got a lifetime ahead of us for thank you notes.
As he headed to the shower, I let out a shaky breath. Had he bought my lie, or was he just playing along? I spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through motions of last-minute wedding prep. James seemed normal, loving, excited about our big day. But now every smile, every touch felt off, like he was wearing a mask, and I could see the edges where it didn't quite fit. That night, after James fell asleep, I snuck to the living room with my laptop. With shaky hands, I opened the video file from the USB. It started similarly to the DVD. The same forest clearing, the same bonfire, but this time the camera was steady, the image clearer. I could make out more details of the robed figures, their animal masks even more disturbing in high definition. James's voice rang out again.
The time has come. Our sacrifice has been prepared.
The camera panned to show a stone altar. On it lay a person, a woman, struggling against her bonds. Her face was covered, but I could see long, dark hair spilling over the edge of the altar. That hair looked disturbingly like mine. One of the masked figures approached the altar, raising a wicked-looking knife.
With his blood, we seal our pact,
James intoned. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart threatening to burst out of my chest. This couldn't be real. This had to be some elaborate movie prop, right? A sick joke. But deep down, I knew this was real, and I was in danger. I must have made some noise because suddenly James was there in the doorway.
Lily, what are you doing up?
I looked up at him. This man I thought I knew, this man I was supposed to marry tomorrow, and I felt nothing but terror. I couldn't sleep, I managed to say. He came closer, his eyes darting to the closed laptop.
Wedding jitters again? Come on, let's go back to bed. Everything will be better in the morning.
As he led me back to our room, his hand on the small of my back, all I could think was, would I even survive until morning? I lay awake for hours, mind racing. I knew I couldn't go through with the wedding, but I also knew that I couldn't just confront James. Not when I'd seen what he was capable of. I need to run, but how? Where would I go? As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I made a decision. I had to get out, and I had to do it now. I pretended to be asleep as James got up, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he'd heard it. I felt his lips brush my forehead.
See you at the altar, my love,
he whispered before leaving. As soon as I heard his car pull away, I sprang into action. I grabbed a small backpack and started throwing in essentials. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop, phone charger. I emptied out my rainy day cash stash, about $500, and shoved it into the bag. I then grabbed my purse, making sure the DVD was still in there. I ran to James's office and retrieved the wooden box from his desk drawer. My hands shook as I opened it, half expecting the bones inside to start rattling on their own. I don't know why I took it. Evidence, I guess. Or maybe I thought it was going to give me some clue about what James was really up to. I was about to leave when I noticed something I'd missed before. A small notebook, tucked under some papers. I flipped it open and felt my blood run cold. It was filled with names and dates. Some were crossed out, others circled. Next to each name was a symbol, the same symbol carved into the wooden box. And there, on the last page, was my name. Next to it was that day's date and a symbol I hadn't seen before, a star inside a circle. I shoved the notebook into my bag along with the box and ran out of the house. I got into my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get my keys into the ignition. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Mrs. Henderson next door giving me a strange look. I realized how odd I must look. The bride, fleeing on her wedding day. I drove to the police station, my mind racing. This was it. I was going to expose everything. But as I sat in the parking lot, doubt crept in. What exactly was I going to tell them? That my fiancé was part of some weird cult? That I found some creepy videos in a box of bones? It all seemed so unbelievable. And then there was his family to consider. The Blackwoods practically owned this town. James's father was a judge and his uncle the chief of police. Who would believe me over them? Before I could change my mind, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my maid of honor asking where I was. The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. I had a whole wedding party waiting for me. Dozens of guests would be arriving soon. In a panic, I made a decision that would haunt me for months to come. I drove to the Oakwood Inn, where the wedding was to be held. As soon as I walked in, I was swept up in a whirlwind of activity. Hair, makeup, getting into my dress. My bridesmaids chattered excitedly around me, but their voices sounded distant, like I was underwater.
Lily, Eartha Lily.
My maid of honor, Sarah, was waving her hand in front of my face.
You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost.
I forced a smile. Nervous, I guess. She squeezed my hands.
Cold feet are normal, but trust me, once you see James waiting for you at the end of that aisle, all your doubts will melt away.
If only she knew. As I stood there in the bridal suite, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest, I made a decision. I was going to face this head on. No more running, no more hiding. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and opened the door. My dad was waiting to walk me down the aisle, his eyes misty with pride. If only he knew. The wedding march began, and we started our walk. The church was packed, every eye on me. But I only saw James, standing at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. But for a moment, my resolve wavered. How could this man who looked at me with such love be involved in something so sinister? As I reached the altar, James took my hand, his touch sending conflicting waves of comfort and terror through me. The officiant began the ceremony, his words washing over me in a blur.
If anyone could show just 'cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace.
This was it. My last chance. I cleared my throat. I have something to say. A collective gasp went through the church. James's hand tightened on mine, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and... was that fear?
Lily,
he whispered, his voice tight.
What are you doing?
I turned to face the congregation, my voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. I'm sorry, but I can't go through with this wedding. Not until I get some answers. I pulled out my phone and the DVD from my bouquet. James, you need to explain this. Now. His face went pale as he recognized the DVD.
Where did you get that?
He hissed, his charming facade cracking. It doesn't matter, I said, my voice carrying through the now silent church. What matters is what's on it. A ritual in the woods, people in masks, your voice, talking about sacrifices. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw James's parents exchanged a worried glance.
Lily, please,
James said, reaching for me, his eyes darting nervously around the room.
This isn't the time or place.
I stepped back. No more secrets, no more lies. You tell me the truth, James. What are you involved in? For a moment, he just stared at me, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Then, to my shock, he started to laugh. It wasn't a joyful sound, but hollow and tinged with bitterness.
Oh, Lily,
He said, shaking his head.
You weren't supposed to find out. Not like this. Not yet.
He turned to face the congregation, his posture changing, becoming more commanding.
I suppose the cat's out of the bag now. Sorry, folks, but this wedding's gonna be a little different than planned.
To my horror, several people in the pews stood up. They reached into their jackets and pulled out those terrifying animal masks that I'd seen in the video. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice rising with the panic. "James, what is this?" He turned back to me, his eyes cold now, all pretense of love gone.
It's our legacy, Lily. Our birthright. The Blackwood family has been the guardians of this town for generations. We keep the balance, make the hard choices so others don't have to.
Guardians? Hard choices? You're talking about human sacrifice. He winced.
It's more complicated than that. The rituals, they protect the town. Keep evil at bay. Without them, this place would fall into chaos and ruin.
I shook my head, unable to believe what I was hearing. This is insane! You're all insane!
I know it sounds crazy.
James said, taking a step toward me, his voice low and urgent.
But I love you, Lily. I chose you not just as my wife, but as my partner in this. You're strong enough to bear this burden with me.
Bear this burden? James, you're talking about murder!
No!
A new voice rang out. I turned to see James's father standing up, his face grave.
Not murder. Sacrifice. There's a difference.
More people were standing now, donning masks. I looked around wildly, realizing with growing horror that at least half of the guests were in on this. "The woman in the video," I said, a terrible thought occurring to me. "The one at the altar. Was that supposed to be me?" James's composure cracked completely. His eyes darted around nervously, and sweat beaded on his forehead.
No, that was a rehearsal of sorts, to prepare you for your role.
My role? As what, some kind of ritualistic murderer?
As a protector.
He insisted, his voice rising with desperation.
Lily, please, just listen. Let me explain everything. You'll understand.
For a moment I wavered. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted there to be some explanation that would make all of this okay. But then I remembered the terror in that woman's eyes, the cold command in James's voice. Whatever this was, it wasn't right. I took a step back. "No, I don't want to understand. I want no part of this." I turned to run, but found my path blocked by masked figures. They were closing in from all sides, their animal masks grotesque in the church's dim light.
I'm sorry, Lily.
James said from behind me, his voice cold again.
But you don't have a choice. Once you're part of this, you're part of it for life.
I felt a hand grip my arm, and the panic surged through me. Without thinking, I lashed out, my elbow connecting with someone's face. There was a cry of pain, and suddenly, chaos erupted. Guests were screaming, some running for the exits, while others, the masked ones, tried to grab me. I saw my parents being held back by men in suits, confusion and terror on their faces.
Get her!
James shouted, his voice cracking with panic.
Don't let her leave!
I ducked under grasping hands, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I caught a glimpse of Sarah, my maid of honor, her eyes wide with shock. "Run!" I screamed at her. "Get out of here!" I made it to the church doors, shoving them open with all of my strength. Outside, I hear sirens in the distance. For a moment, relief washed over me. The police were coming. But then I remembered. James's uncle was the chief of police. They weren't coming to help me. My wedding dress caught on something as I fled, tearing a long strip from the hem. That I didn't care. I just ran, my bare feet pounding against the pavement, my lungs burning. I could hear shouts from behind me, and I didn't dare look back. I found myself in the parking lot, surrounded by rows of cars. For a moment, panic threatened to overwhelm me. I didn't have my keys. Then I spotted Sarah's car. She always kept a spare key hidden in the wheel well. My shaking hands found it, and seconds later, I was peeling out of the lot, tires screeching. In my rearview mirror, I saw James and several masked figures burst out of the church. James's face was contorted with rage, a far cry from the loving man I thought I knew. He pointed to my retreating car, shouting something I couldn't hear. I drove like a madwoman. weaving through traffic and blowing through red lights. Every set of highlights in my rearview mirror sent a jolt of fear through me. Were they following me? How far did their influence reach? It wasn't until I crossed the state line that I finally allowed myself to breathe. I pulled into a rundown motel, paid cash for a room, and collapsed on the bed, still in my torn wedding dress. As the adrenaline wore off, the reality of what happened began to sink in. My entire life just imploded. The man I loved, the future I planned, it was all a lie. And now I was a fugitive running from a cult that had infiltrated every level of my hometown society. I curled up on the bed, violent sobs racking my body. The events of the day played on repeat in my mind. James's cold laughter, the grotesque masks, the terror on my parents' faces. What had happened to them? Were they safe? Or had the cult done something to them? Sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and full of nightmares. I dreamed of masked figures chasing me through endless dark forests, of James standing over me with a knife, of altars stained with blood. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. For a moment I didn't know where I was, and then it all came flooding back to me, and I ran to the bathroom to throw up. I spent a few days in a daze, barely leaving the motel room. I survived on vending machine snacks and cheap coffee, jumping at every sound outside my door. I knew I couldn't stay there forever, but I had no idea where to go or what to do next. On the third day, I finally woke up the courage to check the news on my phone. There was nothing about a wedding gone wrong, no reports of a missing bride. It was as if nothing happened. The Blackwoods must have covered it all up. That's when I knew I couldn't just run and hide. They would find me eventually, and even if they didn't, how many other innocent people would suffer because of their rituals? I had to do something. I had to expose them. But how? I had no proof beyond the DVD and the contents of the wooden box, which I had left behind in my panic. My word against theirs wouldn't be enough, not when they controlled the town. That's when I remembered. I emailed myself the video from the USB and uploaded it to the cloud storage account. With shaking hands, I logged into my email from my phone, and the message was still there, unopened. I downloaded the file and watched it again, forcing myself to look at any details that might help me identify the location or the people involved. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I began researching, digging into the history of Oakwood and the Blackwood family. I reached out to investigative journalists, to podcasters who specialized in exposing cults. Most ignored me. A few responded, intrigued but skeptical. One journalist, a woman named Elena, seemed particularly interested. We arranged a meeting at a coffee shop in a nearby city. As I sat waiting for her, my nerves were on edge. Every person who walked in made me flinch. Was that James? Did that woman's bag look like it could be hiding a mask? Elena turned out to be a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to my story without interruption, her face growing more serious with each detail. "I believe you," she said when I finished. "I've heard whispers about the Blackwoods before, but never anything this concrete. This is big, Lily, really big." For the first time since my wedding day, I felt a glimmer of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by Elena's next words. "But we need to be careful. If what you're saying is true, these people are powerful and dangerous. We need more evidence before we can go public with this." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "So what do we do now?" Elena leaned forward, her voice low. "We dig deeper. I have some contacts that might be able to help, but Lily, you need to understand, this could take time, and it could be dangerous." As if to emphasize her point, at that moment, a man in a dark suit walked into the coffee shop. He looked around casually, but something about him made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Elena must have noticed my reaction. "Go," she said quietly. "Use the back door. I'll be in touch." I slipped out of the coffee shop, my heart pounding. As I walked briskly down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. For months, I moved from town to town, always looking over my shoulder, never staying in one place for too long. I worked odd jobs for cash, using public libraries to continue my research. Slowly, with Elena's help, I began to piece together a picture of how deep the Blackwoods' influence ran. There were whispers of other towns, other families like the Blackwoods, a network of guardians stretching across the country, maybe even beyond. The more I uncovered, the more terrified and determined I became. But the constant fear and stress were taking their toll. I lost weight, dark circles formed under my eyes. I jumped at every unexpected sound, flinched at every touch. Sleep became a luxury, always interrupted by vivid nightmares of masked figures and blood-stained altars. One night, in yet another anonymous motel room, I woke up screaming, convinced I'd seen James standing at the foot of my bed. It took me hours to convince myself it had been a dream. I'm writing this now from another motel room, my hands shaking as I type. I don't know if they're still looking for me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to go home. But I do know that I can't stop until the truth comes out. To anyone reading this, be careful. Evil doesn't always look like you expect it to. Sometimes it wears a charming smile and offers you a diamond ring. Sometimes it hides behind respectability and tradition. And if you are ever invited to a wedding in a small town called Oakwood, run. Run as fast and as far as you can. Because trust me, some vows are better left unspoken. I don't know what will happen next, but I do know one thing. I'm going to bring them down. Somehow, some way, I'm going to expose the Blackwood family and their twisted rituals. And maybe, just maybe I'll find a way to save the next bride they try to recruit. If you have any information that might help, or if you've been experiencing something similar, please reach out. Be careful. They're watching. They're always watching. And to James, if you're reading this, I loved you. I really did. But I never, ever want to be a part of your legacy. You chose the wrong bride to sacrifice. Update. For those asking, yes, I've managed to contact some friends and family. Sarah, whose car I took, is safe. She got out during the chaos. Others, I'm not sure. Some act like nothing happened. Others have vanished. I don't know if they're threatened, recruited, or worse. I moved again. Kept seeing a black SUV outside of my motel, and one night I saw someone in an animal mask watching my room. Paranoia? Maybe, but I'm not risking it. The journalist, Elena, and I are making progress. We found financial records hinting at a network of families like the Blackwoods in other towns. It's not enough yet, but we're getting there. Oakwood seems fine so far. No catastrophes. Did they find another sacrifice, or it was all just for power? I don't know. I'm exhausted, scared, and some days it's hard to keep going. But I think of the potential victims out there, and I know I can't stop.
And that was My Fiance's Voice Was on a Disturbing DVD I received 3 days before our wedding by prodshebi. I'm just never going to get these names right. I'm so sorry. Who also wrote I Got Stuck in a Time Loop in My High Rise, if you remember that one. So this one I feel is a little bit, it makes a little bit more sense, right? It's this really interesting story where this lady who's about to marry love of her life kind of a situation uncovers dark truths about him and creepy rituals and everything like that. And it turns out it's like the whole town is basically in on it, or at least the majority of the town, based on like their family status and everything. It's a story that we've kind of heard before in other little like mainly films and TV shows and even storybooks, for example. But I like it. I do. I think it's a good simple plot. Cult activity going on. They're trying to do these things in order to keep the town safe. It's like a whole protection thing. It's classic. It's classic. It's good. Are they 100% true with what they're saying? Well, obviously, you don't know. Because we don't see anything bad happen if they don't sacrifice anybody. We have no evidence or proof about that, which is fine. You know, I think no matter what, this story is a good one. I've always enjoyed creepy cult kind of stuff going on. That's always just been a pleasantry kind of thing. It makes me think of like Alan Wake 2, for example. It's just nice. It's just nice. Well, I mean, not nice, but you know, it's a good simple thing you can go along with. And yeah, I wouldn't say it was anything too bad really about this. I found the story to be quite enjoyable because it was mainly from the Lily's perspective. I thought it would be a great opportunity to let Jenni narrate a full story. And I know she had a lot of fun doing it, and I'm really proud of her for doing that. So thank you so much, Jenni, for that. That was really cool. I thought you did a really good job. We'll see what the people down below think, but be fucking nice. That's okay. So yeah, and I got to play obviously the creepy fiancé, which I thought was quite fun, being a little bit of a southern drawl kind of a man. I thought that was kind of fun. yeah, I feel pretty good about this story. Pretty good indeed. Well done. Well done, prodshebi. Excited to see what else you're going to come up with. Well, I've been Nate at Night. This has been yet another cool story down. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know what else you want to see next. I'm probably going to be starting... I don't know if I'm going to call it a series. I might not. Depends on how much content I can find. Where I kind of read bad stories. But I'm not talking like meh stories. I'm talking like the really painful bad stories. I think that'd be very fun to kind of see how much of it I can deal with before like totally losing my shit. I think that'd be very funny. So if there's anything that you believe is super, super bad, I mean, it could be a scary story, it could be a fan fiction, I don't really care. As long as I have permission to read those things, I'd be happy to do it. Let me know what you think. Let me know what I should be covering. Let me know what you want me to do. We will see you next time. Bye. Thank you so much to my YouTube members and Patreon members for all the love and support. It's thanks to people like you that we can keep growing.